So I've always found the concept of God's call to be a fascinating one. It's one of those ideas that God's call is always present, but it's on us then to be aware of and to listen to that call and to respond to that call. Sometimes God's call is quiet, and sometimes he's a little bit more obvious in his messaging. In 2009, my grandfather passed away, and this was after 2 years of battling for his life, and those 2 years left an indelible mark on myself and my family. He died on a Sunday in 2009, and that same Sunday, the pastor was actually preaching on Isaiah's call. I, that Sunday, had also been tasked with having to carry my mom's cell phone, just in case. And so that Sunday, as the pastor was preaching, he did a classic call and response through his sermon, where he would reflect on the text, and then he would ask the congregation, "Are you ready to hear God's call?" And he had set up several members of the congregation to answer a call on their cell phone. So he'd ask the question, "Are you ready for God's call?" And then a cell phone would somewhere in the congregation would go off, and somebody cheekily would answer, "Yes, I got the call, ready to go, Pastor." So we went through this probably 3 or 4 times, and on the next time he asked, "Are you ready to take God's call?" And the phone in my pocket went off. And I wasn't ready for that call. I hadn't been prepped by the pastor to take a call. It was the nurse telling us that my grandfather, my mom's dad, had passed away. And we had been through this like 3 times across the congregation. And so, of course, everyone's like, "Oh, yeah, the next phone's going off." And then they see my whole family stand up and leave and immediately know what's going on, right? We're talking a small congregation of 300 folks, just like this. And so it was a very powerful moment. And as a 15-year-old, right, 16-year-old at the time, you're kind of struck by that coincidence, right? Like, coincidences are God's way of staying anonymous. It struck me that God is always calling. We just need to be aware of that call in order to respond to that call. But most importantly, respond to that call whether or not we're ready for it. And so that's my prayer for the congregation and for all of us today, is that we are aware enough that God is always calling, but also listening and tuned in enough to respond to that call, and then prepared to go whether or not we feel we're ready or not. This is a reading from Isaiah. Listen for the word of the Lord. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphs were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another and said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." The pivots on the threshold shook at the voices of those who called, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, "Woe is me! I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Then one of the seraphs flew to me, holding a live coal that had been taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. The seraph touched my mouth with it and said, "Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed and your sin is blotted out." Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for me?" And I said, "Here I am, send me." This is the word of the Lord.